Thank you all for coming. So the idea is presenting my outline of my dissertation. I will start giving a really brief forest code idea, but I will simplify a lot because it's a very complex law. And then talk about Atlantic forest and why I chose my case study and how this discussion of the case study could bring to the forest code policy needs discussion. And I'll open for you guys to give as much feedback as you can. So I'll try to be brief in the presentation to you to give me as much feedback as possible. So just a general history of the environmental legislation in Brazil. The first code was first fought in 34, but it was not, didn't have the main ideas that we think about today as the permanent protected areas and the legal reserves. They came later. For example, in the 65, you already had the ideas of the areas of the permanent protected areas, but were not the same rights as they are today. I will discuss them with more detail. What are they for those who don't know? But they are main. So basically, what I want to show here is like there is a whole evolution of this environmental legislation, and there is a whole lot of media in its change in 2012. So let's discuss a little bit it, and that's caused the interest of many people to start to discuss forest code. So the forest code we have today, it's the main instruments to protect and recover forest cover, any type of vegetation, natural vegetation cover in private properties in Brazil. So it also talks about fire, talks about use of wood projects, talks about a lot of things, but I will contain myself only to talk about legal reserves and permanent protected areas, that are the things that I'm more interested about. So permanent protected areas are areas that have always to be protected in all the private properties. They include steep slopes, riparian forests, areas around springs and hilltops. Also, they vary according to the wide of the river. So if the river has, for example, 10 meters, you have to present a buffer to preserve a buffer zone of 30 meters. And if the river has 60 meters wide, you have to preserve a buffer zone of 500 meters. And the other component that I will talk about a lot is the legal reserves. So the quantity that each property owner, private property owner, have to conserve in their own property depends on the biome they're in, and mostly it goes by the Atlantic forest, the Cerrado, and all the other biomes, Pampa, and they're here too as 20%, and Caatinga, and the Amazon. But that's how it gets tricky. Probably some of you are getting weird with all this 50%. That's the estimation of the new, because some of the new forest code, for example, they municipalities that had, one example, 50% or more of forest areas could reduce their requirements for private owners for 50%. So this guy did the modeling, a bunch of people actually, they model a little bit how it would look like in a big pixel level analysis. Okay, so the forest code we have today have several critics. The one that came in 2012. The two main ones, no, I would say more than two, but the two main ones are an amnesty for landowners that were illegal before I said before 2008, and they have a whole reduction in the amount of restoration requirements, because they divided, for example, the requirements between size of property, and the property owners that have small properties, and it's considered four legal fiscal modes. For example, it's one of the standards they have for 4, 2, and 1, separate like really small, and smaller properties, and they all have reductions in the forest code requirements. And so this was why they thought about that. Actually, they got this, they tried to put together two laws. So one law that was thinking more about agrarian reform, that law created these fiscal modes. And they are basically, and the main land use type of the properties, the average obtained by its land use in each distance, in each municipality distance that is related to infrastructure and to land costs and uh, to get material there and like all these things that you know. And other land uses in general too, they also take in consideration and what the municipality consider to say a family property, like what is a small family for the concept of the municipality. So you can see the varies a lot. Like this area, it can go from 5 to 20 hectares. In the Amazon, one fiscal mode can be 100 hectares, for example. So with the new forest code, let's see again the requirements buffer zones, right? So if I'm a small landowner, that means 100, 400 hectares in some places, and 800 hectares, or only 20 hectares in other places, depending on where you are in Brazil, you only have to restore 15 meters of your buffer zone. You don't have to restore all of it if you are within 2 and 4 fiscal modes. If you have 2 fiscal modes, you have to restore 8. And if you have 1 fiscal mode, you have to restore 5 hectares of a buffer zone, of 5 meters of buffer zone in relation to the rivers. And around the streams, they reduce it from 50 to 15. So if you are one of these categories, now you have to get 15 meters of restoration around the streams. So of course, this changing the law caught attention of scientists all over the world, especially nature, did a whole series of trying to get your attention about Brazil's changing for the forest law. It's getting bad for wetlands. It's going to have a lot of results for sustainability of the country, calls for blocking the forest code. And before then, actually, the Brazilian scientists were actually publishing more in national census as a requirement because the discussion of the change started before 2000. So this was a long process until the change actually happened. And the civil society was starting to be more aware. I guess the Brazilians can help me, I don't know, 2010, 2011. And that was also when the scientists started like talking more about the science code. But before, they took for granted. So it's something that it's also, I would like to us to think as scientists, like when we have what we consider to be good regulation, if we don't study them, does it give small feedback to people, to policymakers that want to change? For example, the big pressure of the rural section of the Brazilian Congress was getting expression, and they were saying, okay, tell me the scientific evidence. It takes time for science, so maybe the laws that we like also study them and study the implications of them. I start thinking about more that because you look for forest code reference and they almost start coming out only in this time, 2010, 2009. And before that, if you think about the code is really old, so why only start then? So the new forest code also brought what they're considered opportunities of the new forest code. The most famous one is the rural environment cadastro. So I will show you maybe how easy it is. Actually, they changed it in December, and our minister is being sued by the rural viewer committee of our Congress because it says it is illegal to show people's private property in an open system. So I don't know how long, I don't know why this is not opening. Anyway, you can choose here, for example, it's really easy now, it's amazing. You just choose here, you select your state, and then you go and then you can download automatic all the properties together. For example, just last year I went to the field, tried to get this data. I had to stay 1 week going to the secretary every day and asking them, and they're like, oh, it's a whole bureaucracy, we have to sign this, sign that, and now it's all available, so that's really good. So another thing that they talk about is the program of environment regulation. So it talks about incentives and other ways of achieving the compliance levels of the forest code. For example, they talk about payment for environment service, and they have different targets. So they say who would be the main actors they were looking for. And one of them are people that depend, watershed that depend on restoration of riparian zones, for example. And you have agricultural care, tax reduction, the land reduction itself, and reduction impacts related to products that you're going to use in the restoration, fences, seeds, plants. And the third one is the mechanism that was included was the environment quotas. What is that? So if I'm a landowner and I have a surplus in my forest code requires in distance is only in the legal reserve requirements, because remember, permanent protected areas are permanent protected. So I have a surplus in my area, I can sell to another person that has a debit. And then you create a market. And actually, the market itself was not in the previous version, but the idea of changing but was within watershed. And now you can change within the whole biome. So that is another predict that's going to impact, for example, biodiversity, connectivity, and you can discuss a lot of things. So how to foster compliance with this policy mix policy? You can either increase enforcement or give incentives to people to comply with the law, right? So this is the current compliance levels. This is 2012 actually, but of estimation of compliance levels of Brazilian forest code. You can see that there are a lot of areas that are in supply, surplus. So these areas potentially could change. And you remember, this is one biome, and this is one of the most that is being the highest deforestation rates in Brazil. So if this system really goes on, they could easily buy quotas from here, and they would compensate, and they would be under law compliance. Just an idea. So this came my research idea of like, what are the trade-offs in terms of cost effectiveness and equity of the different forest code instruments? So when would be good to use more one or more other? Consider that you're gonna also always potentially be using both. So let's go back to this picture. I know when I put this, most of you think about Amazon, you're like eyes blinking, but today I want to talk about my favorite biome, Atlantic forest. So Atlantic forest is where I grew up. For me, there's no more beautiful place than that. If you haven't been, I recommend you to go. It's a biodiversity hotspot. That less than 12% of natural cover remains in the biome. More than 80% of the remaining fragments are in less than 50 hectares. Almost half of all the remaining forest is within the forest edge, because it's within 100 meters of the forest edge, so it's potentially suffering edge effects. And most of the threatened species in the Brazil red list come from the biome. So just for you to see, like this, the yellowish area was the previous cover, and the remainings of green are the remaining places, and these red spots are places that have been deforested in 2013, 2014. So the biome still goes to some deforestation. So just because I know some of you like animals, so this is some of the dendrogram grouping of the medium and large species, and I thought my bird friends would be here, but so I put some birds for them. But I mean, everybody, you can like whatever, right? I like small mammals, for example, and there is also many reasons for conserving, right? Everybody gets yours. But what do you know? So what do we know about Atlantic forest called the Atlantic forest? Most of the Atlantic forest was deforested before 2008, right? That's what we talked about, is that old frontier colonized starting to be deforested 1500s and going until today, but it's very few remaining. So most of the property owners are within the new forest code, considered to be, if they are small forest owners, they can reduce the amount of restoration they have. And if they are bigger forest owners, now they have 20 years to achieve forest code requirements. If they show that they are they're starting, they have to show 1/10 every year that they're increasing in the requirements of restoration, for example. So in my pilot field visit, I know most of you know my field site didn't work so well. So I was like searching desperately for a new idea to save my research. And then I ended up going to several universities, and I went to the watershed committee of my city, and that's where the idea started bringing together. So in the committee, they discuss what they do, because in Brazil, not all the watersheds are still organized, but the Rio watershed is already organized. So they charge for water for the big users, and they decide what they're gonna go do to the money to for example, restore. There is the INE. So they have this payment for environment service project, and that's one of the places I visit, for example. And then they demand to restore. You see, the areas, these are the places the project demands to restore and are restoring is actually not more than the forest code requirements. So that start thinking, and then they told me that actually they're going to expand the project. And I thought, oh, great, because first I saw the prioritization they did to the expansion is beautiful. They consider water potentials of soil infiltration, like all this erosion matches, potential of evapotranspiration to increase the local water. But actually, they were basing their expansion only in this graph. That is only says how much hectares they wanted to achieve in the project and how much they did achieve. So I was like, okay, that doesn't say much about environment additionality. Is that enough? It's like they were saying about spending over $50 million in 5 years in this expansion, and some of them were like, really, that we're spending all the money, that's all we have, and the discussion came up, and I think there is no really like assessment of the outcomes. So then I thought, oh, let's focus my research, do a case study of Rio Claro, right? Because there is a payment for environment service, and I met the secretary, the environment secretary, and he was super willing to share the data about how the municipality is spending with environment requirements, enforcement of the law as well. So that was the idea came from. So let's see if that works. So, okay. So just so you guys to have an idea of my study site, that's Brazil. Like that imagery is changing over the years. That's already Rio de Janeiro State. That's Rio de Janeiro City, and that's my municipality. It's how close it is to Rio. So they say that 40% of the Rio water can potentially come from this watershed. So just so you have an idea. So you see that the on-site, you cannot see image reduction in forest. It doesn't seem to change that much. You see different in colors, but it's related to the date. But from here, we cannot see forest regrowth or forest reduction in this area, right? So the municipality was established in the 18th century, and then it was followed by coffee plantations, and all was turned into coffee. And then because of the coffee crisis that followed with the competition with São Paulo and the reduction in price, they abandoned or transformed the places in pasture for milk cow. And that's what the rural areas still look like. But also, almost 50% of the population right now depends on public employment. So they're employed by the government. So how all this things go together. And here there's a national park, so these forests are protected. But and here there's a light electric company that owns this big area. But the rest of the municipality, although the municipality has over 40% of forest cover, and if you just look at these numbers, you can think that it's under compliance. You can see that it's very concentrated in these plaques. So we will have to investigate more. And investigating the land side data that we have from the area, we see that there is no deforestation being caused by the land since 2010. Could be a forest transition, but of course it's really hard to get forest transition in the first stage of forest with landside imagery. So because it's a fine scale, and that would be a big pattern scale. So Toddling and all and Sarah both here, this article that they use LiDAR to train landside imagery to do a continuous classification of forests. And I want to do a similar approach with but I will use autophoto with, and then because that's what the state has as its control for environment policy. And then I try to understand what explains the remaining forest cover. So elevation, slope, and aspects of this normal, this physical characteristics, but also like social characteristics from, for example, property size, distance from roads, this current land. So this is seen a lot in deforestation, but not so much in restoration. So the land, so use all the layers information to model compliance, but I'll model separately the present compliance with the permanent protected areas and with the legal reserve, because they are different spatially. And I will also model regrowth, aiming to understand if the decision making, if you including patterns of that potentially would influence decision making with biophysical feathers, I would predict, potentially have a good prediction of places that would have forest regrowth. And then, of course, all this information has to do with behavior, landowner behaviors too, right? So some questions that are addressed from that is like, may landowners have changed their perception of the forest code enforcement with the implementation of the cadastro rural, that once they had to put their names within that? Is a forest transition is really occurring in the region? If so, what's driving it? Why people decide to participate in this payment for environment service? So first, for understanding motivation to compliance with the forest code, I built this model over an article that Winter and May did for farmers in Europe. Actually, it's not in South America, but they assume that for the potential to decide or not to comply, first you have to be aware of the rules and have the capacity of compliance. And also then there is normative motivations, how much you think the law is fair, how much you think the law is important, things like normative information about the law, social information, how much I perceive people around me thinking that my compliance with the law is important for my social relation. And the most talked about is the calculated motivations. That's pretty much the rational choice, right? Like that people would be complying if the benefits overcame the gain in terms of financial. So this payment for environment service actually has 72 people participating right now, and 11 dropped already the participation since the start in 2012. It pays from $30 to $33 an hectare. I would change it back to the reais because the variation of money in reais is so much that it's going to be easier. But just to you to have an idea of the number, and it pays more for conservation than for restoration. I think that's an important thing to discuss in this in this scenario, right, in this context. And it's paid, like I mentioned, by the water users. So, okay. And then I will explore why landowners decide to participate, comparing the values, because I use the value belief norm, and many other conservation behavior theories talk about values as well. So I use values in relation to the payment for environment system rationality. That is rational theory, because you say if you pay for cover the opportunity cost of somebody, it means the alternative use of the land that you choose to participate, right? And I will insert an element of risk tolerance. So I will play a game with that. That I will do with semi-structured interviews, collect this data, and I'm still checking how it's going to be my instrument, but it's almost done. And that would be great if some of you guys have experience with that and are willing to go with it with me again, because it's always good to have input in those areas. But I will include a game discussing risk. So if you perceive the risk as being higher than it is, I will do like throwing dices with different sides. So some dices have 20, so it's 1 in 20 the chance of being caught, or like 1 in 6. If I increase, and you would have to pay the fine, would that change your rationality? So in this project, there are 22 participants that have really small property that is within 1 and 2 fiscal modes. 4 that have big properties that is beyond 4. No, actually, this one is beyond 20. The medium one is beyond 4, from 4 to 20. And the small one is 32, is people that go from 2 to 4 fiscal modes. But in relation to the distribution of the money, you can see that the big properties get most of it, even though they're a very small number in terms of distribution of money. They get most of it. So it raises the equity questions really strongly if you think about it, especially if they don't live there, for example. Let's think. For example, the people that I had the opportunity to talk about in the pilot fieldwork, like the small owners had sustainable agriculture, and the big owners, I had somebody taking care of the house. So I don't know the whole, but I just went in a brief time and didn't stay long, but maybe is there a pattern? How is this equity issue? And then finally, I will do like a quasi-experiment comparison. So I will match properties that participate with properties that don't participate based on the same structured interviews and the information that I acquired from the remote sensing. And together, I will create these matching groups and see what are the forest land covers outcomes of the project. So there's a lot of assumptions involved, and I know that. The first assumption is that I'm going to find good matching groups. That's the most obvious one. But I also think that comparing both methods, the prediction that the modeling of regrowth together with the matching, having the two methods, different methodologies to compare the same results, maybe gonna say something about potential mistakes in the methodology or not. So I want to understand what are the lessons learned from this study case. Is the municipality really under forest transition? Does the payment for environment serve bring any environmentality in this case? What are the equity trade-offs? How much money was it spent to restore this big owner or small owners properties that in theory should be restored under the forest code? And will my finding be generalizable? That's a question that it's tricky to answer. I think I need your, because it's a study case, how much can I really generalize? Unfortunately, I don't think much, but I can bring to the discussion, and that I want to feedback from you guys. And that's it. Thank you.